Bhloscaidh describes the typical Irish ballad. He says the melancholy dominating most of these songs is still the expression of the nationalist disposition today and written in 1870. How could it be otherwise in most of the people whose conquerors are always inventing new up-to-date methods of aggression? And speaking in terms of the impact of the famine, I'll talk about this in a minute. If it goes on like this for another 30 years, there will be Irishmen only in America. Because in this time with Gaul, in almost or more like a angle from Fleadh and international as Gaelic, agus near how much of the are now foreign force of bullshit. Language job, it's called you the fault. The Fenians are founded, first of all, in America by John O'Mahony, veteran of the Young Ireland Rebellion of 1848, also fluent Gaelic speaker and a student of Irish, and James Stephens, who also took part in the 1848 revolution. These two people escape arrest and go to France, the home of international revolution in the period, where they enter into, Stephens in particular, Auguste Blanquet's secret organisation, and the same structure that is implied by Fenianism and their sort of vanguardist modus operandi or approach very much mirrors Stephens' experience in France. Stephens and O'Mahony then decide that they're going to set up a dual organisation. One in America, amongst the millions of Irish American immigrants, the other the domestic home organisation. The Fenian Brotherhood is set up first of all in New York by John O'Mahony, and then in Langton's Billet, or Timber Yard, on St. Patrick's Day in 1858 by James Stephens. And let's be under no doubt that it was a revolutionary organisation that was pledged towards armed insurrection, but this must be understood, as so eloquently read out in terms of the proclamation, which said, having no honourable alternative left, we appeal to force of arms as the last resort. Because this was a period in Irish history which had witnessed from 1823 up until 1843, 20 years of continuous constitutional mass mobilisation, which eschewed under the leadership of Daniel O'Connell political violence, and which was met consistently by the refusal to meet the demands. Catholic emancipation is conceded in 1828, but the demand for Irish self-government and repeal is rebuked by Robert Peel, or Orange Peel as Daniel O'Connell calls it. And it's the same British administration in Ireland that consistently denies these demands for increased democratisation through constitutional means that then oversees the cataclysm of the Irish famine, in which 1 million died and 1 million fled to America. So understand the Fenians' recourse to arms as a call conditioned by their bitter experience of constitutional national politics, and conditioned by the reality that the British system in this period was not a democratic system. Lord Palmerston, the British Prime Minister, told the Irish MPs on the House of Commons, this is still a property's house. Democracy is not a right. So the Fenian Proclamation is a proclamation for democratic right against an alien government who subverted this right in Ireland consistently, and the appeal is through the force of arms, because consistent appeals which did not employ the force of arms met with rejection and scorn, as was mentioned in the proclamation. So what are the Fenians and what do they stand for? We said we have suffered centuries of outrage, enforced poverty and bitter misery. Okay? This is the story of an oppressed Irish nation which has suffered a process of colonisation, which has come through a century of penal legislation in the Dublin Parliament, which was the possession of a property and oligarchical Anglican elite, which constituted less than 10% of the population, but withheld political liberty or any sort of political influence and representation from 90% of the population, 80% Catholic and another 10% Presbyterian. This is a country which, witnessing the birth of republicanism in France, conditioned by the ideas of the Enlightenment, seizes on this republicanism, not as a rejection or ignoring the sectarian tensions within Ireland, but in viewing republicanism and civic conception of the Irish nation as the only means to transcend the sectarian divisions in this country that are a consequence of colonisation. Wolfe Tone and the United Irishmen were not blind to sectarianism as a manifestation of colonialism. They viewed republicanism as the only thing which would ever cure this. So this nonsense that characterises Republicans as blind to the existence of a million Unionists is a misreading of republicanism. Republicanism is the only panacea for sectarianism in Ireland, because sectarianism in Ireland is rooted in the process of colonisation and continued British interference in Ireland. So we have suffered centuries of outrage and forced poverty and bitter misery. Our rights and liberties have been trampled on by an alien aristocracy. This is not every Protestant in Ireland. This is the landed aristocracy. These are the locusts that they were described. And these locusts are operating in England as well. Marx says that that Ireland is the very moral centre of the British aristocracy and landed aristocracy in England, and their control of England as well. Unable longer to endure the curse of monarchical development, and there's the founding Queen herself, Queen Victoria, we aim at founding a republic based on universal suffrage. So this is an inherently radical demand. Don't worry. This is an inherently radical demand based on classical principles of republicanism. Tom Paine writes a book, Common Sense, which is the title and the content, and he says that mankind, it is not so much the ludicrous nature of monarchy as its evil ramifications which concern mankind. So we have, I think, at the minute, a sort of postmodern republicanism, which suggests that it's okay to have a monarchy. In fact, it might be alright to implement British rule in Ireland. But this was very much not the position of the Fenians. Alright? So what had Engels and Marx to say of the nature of Irish society before the foundation of the Fenians? Engels tours Ireland in 1856, almost to the day 2 years before the foundation of the Fenians, and he describes what he sees. He says, gendarmes, men of arms, that's the peelers, priests, lawyers, bureaucrats, country squires in pleasing profusion and a total absence of any industry at all. This is an economic wasteland because of the famine. So that it would be difficult to understand what all these parasitic growths live on is the distress of the peasants that not supply the other half of the picture. Yeah. Ireland may be regarded as England's first colony, and one which, because of its proximity, is still governed exactly in the old way, and one can already notice here that the so-called liberty of English citizens is based on the oppression of the colonies, and it is through their application of the example of Ireland that Marx and Engels actually changed their initial position that the liberation of the colonies would only come about by beneficial change in the West or in Britain, and they realised that the colonies and suppressed people and oppressed peoples have to liberate themselves in coalition or in solidarity with the English working class and the Western working class. He said, I have never seen so many gendarmes in any country. So an awful lot of this revisionist guff that the Irish complain about oppression, that the most oppressed people ever, actually ignores the reality. This is a man with widespread European experience who consistently says that he had never witnessed military oppression anywhere in Europe on the scale that took place in Ireland, except in Tsarist Russia. Okay? So we'll check. Now, this is the context in which Stephen sets up the Fenians. And Marx and Engels gradually come to realise and analyse the Fenians as a lower class movement which is produced by a seismic change in the nature of the Irish economy. The move from arable, wheat, to pastoral economy and the massive clearances. Okay? And through this, they then analyse Fenianism itself. So Marx writes to Engels in December 1869 that the Irish republicanism, throughout its entire history, could be understood in terms of class. A class movement can easily be traced in the Irish movement itself, from the United Irishmen on. The Irish movement, he means republicanism. He doesn't mean constitutionalism. He didn't even call it Irish. He said it was a form of liberalism, Whiggism. And this very much changed with Wolfe Tone saying the men of property will not support us, the men of property must fail, who's doing to that very respectable class, the men of no property. Or Henry J. McCracken's speech before the Battle of Antrim, where he says the rich always betray the poor. Throughout Irish history, republicanism has been the voice and the political articulation of the lower orders. But what changed in terms of Fenianism was for the first time the lower order seized control of the movement and were dependent on the middle class and the support of the gentlemen. Okay? As for the present Irish movement, the Fenians, there are three important factors. Opposition to lawyers and treating politicians as blarney. Just put Daniel O'Connell's name in there. Opposition to the dictates of priests. To the superior ones, we're talking about Cardinal Paul Cullen here, and Bishop Moriarty, are traitors. As in O'Connell's time, as well as in 1798 to 1800. And number three, the coming out of the agricultural labour class against the farming class at the last meetings. In relation to the leaders of the Fenians themselves, such as Luby and the editorial board of the Irish people, he identifies them as clear anti-clerics in the traditional Republican continental sense. These people were not ignorant reactionaries in love with some sort of romantic notion of the Irish nation. These people were part of a mainstream current of European republicanism. These people were intellectually developed and articulate. These people were probably more sophisticated than the English people who criticised them at the time, and the revisionist historians who criticise them now. Check that. So they came from the Young Ireland movement, and they did it again. We should get the course. It's an easy course, Wait? Yes. John, you covered that much. Can it be two songs? Yes,
But there's no Fenian song. It would have been a song that people would have used, for example, when they went to America and they were working in different places, whatever. It was the way for the Fenians to identify fellow Republicans. So they would whistle a little on the tune. Suppose it'd be like somebody else speaking. We get early order on any other fucking at Belmont or something, or something that by our Protestant brothers and sisters, you know what I mean? People would, you'd hear the South going, you'd hear something. They did similar things in those days. There's a wee song called Down Erin's Lovely Lea. And I don't know the author because there's no author listed for it. On March the 6th and 63, we sailed from Queenstown Quay. Young band of Fenian men bound for America, while journeying with a gallant band, as you may plainly see, we were forced to go from sweet Monroe down Erin's Lovely Lea. For 6 long months we will see from Queenston, Key and Cork, just like an arrow through the sky, to be landed in New York. The Yankee boys with their stars and stripes came flocking down to see a gallant band of Fenian men from Ireland's Raleigh. And one of them stood up to me and he asked me, did I know news of the glory of the grandma of Lord? Or could I tell what Roddy fell his native land to free? And the tower that Captain Mackie sacked, the Aaron's lobby. Yes, so as me did I know where Wolfcombe's body lay, or could I tell the resting place of Emmett's sacred clay? What did I know of Michael Dwyer, the Wicklow mountain lion, and the 3 Manchester marauders, and an Larkin and O'Brien? I can tell you where Crowley fell, was in Kilkenny Wood, and the tower that Captain Mackie sacked, 'twas by his side I stood. When he gave the word, we raised the sword, and we made the tyrant proud, and we raised the green flag o'er our heads, the harp without the crown. When I was leaving Ireland, I passed through sweet Kildare. I do not be mistaken, sure of Connor's buried there. And coming down through Dublin town, we passed Glasnevin too, and it's there young Robert and plays a Beatrice lying through. But now I'm tired of roving, and the seas I will cross o'er, to feel the clasp of honest hands when I return once more. When we go home to sweet Clough, the boys will welcome me, and we'll help to float our Fenian boats down Ireland's glory. Whoa!
We're back to front there. I was back to front from talking actually. So that's actually quite a fitting song, because to understand Fenianism then is to understand the impact of the famine and the influence of America. And as was read out in the proclamation states that the real owners of the soil were removed to make room for cattle, and driven across the ocean to seek the means of living, and the political rights denied to them at home. And this is very much the idea that the experience of free association and networking in America, and the influence of a limited form of republicanism in America, although in a period which this gentleman might call the real American Revolution was taking place, Brian Kelly, the American Civil War was happening, that this American influence is key to understanding the Fenians. Because not only did these people, these exiles, although revisionist historians might call them economic migrants, not only did they carry their bodies to America, they also carried a burning hatred with a political system which had forced them to leave Ireland. Hatred perhaps epitomised in the writings of John Mitchell, who was actually on the Confederate side in the Second American Revolution or the American Civil War, the slave-owning side, who seemed to limit the inclusion of the space of the free, we call it, to white people. Other young Irelanders, such as Thomas Francis Maher, wanted everybody to be free. It agreed with the universalist principles of republicanism. But Mitchell's jail journal was particularly important because it linked the death of 1 million people and the exile of another 1 million people with British rule. It said God Almighty may have sent it at the end of life, but the English delivered the famine. And it was these Irish people meeting on the northeastern seaboard, typically, collecting together. They learned the ideas of political mobilisation from the Trade Association and Daniel O'Connell. They could organise themselves, they were politically intelligent and literate, and they desired then, not so much to gain revenge, but to ameliorate a great wrong that they felt had been done to their country. And Fenianism is the vehicle for this. And Fenian involvement in the American Army, particularly in the Union Army, the Northern Army, is the training ground in their eyes. Not only for a military force to go back to Ireland, but for a grouping which would influence American foreign policy and precipitate a war between the victorious Union and Britain, where Britain supports the Confederacy. Now, looking back in retrospect and all this stuff about special relationships and Theresa May grovelling before Donald Trump, we perhaps forget that in this period, Britain is the predominant world power and America is becoming the emerging power. And there was competition, and there was the prospect of an international war. And in the traditional rhetoric of both tone, England's difficulty is Ireland's opportunity. And this is to understand what the mechanics and dynamics of Fenianism in a military sense was. Okay? Marx clearly understood this. Marx says the Irish famine of 1846 killed more than 1 million people, but it killed poor devils only. To the wealth of the country, it did not the slightest damage. In fact, it increased the wealth of the country. The fact is that as the Irish population diminishes, the Irish rent rolls swell. That depopulation benefits the landlords, with little regard for the people, that mere accessory to the soil. Or as the London Times would have it, the Connemara Irish man will someday be as scarce as the Manhattan indeed. That the expropriation, eviction, death and expulsion of the native Irish population was a little concern in a period of laissez-faire economics. So people who rightly condemn Stalin for the implementation of collectivization, forced collectivization, and the destruction of the Kulak class, and the Holocaust in Ukraine, this can be explained by an over-rigid application of economic doctrine, and not the same criticism be labelled of the English conduct and adherence to laissez-faire economics during the Irish famine. And this is what they did. But there was a problem with this. Like all good things in this bad world, this profitable method has its drawbacks. With the accumulation of rents in Ireland, the accumulation of the Irish in America keeps pace. The Irishman banished by sheep and ox reappears on the other side of the ocean as a Fenian. And face to face with the old Queen of the Seas rises Britain, threatening and more threatening the young giant republic. And it's in that context, the potential for a global conflagration between America and Britain, that the Fenians want to seize the opportunity. And it's in that context of the feasible chance of military success that they resort to armed struggle. Not as armed struggle as some sort of abstract thing that you have the intention to do whenever you want. And instead of down there in lovely League, we're going to have the League one. Yeah, come on. You get what I was thinking.
When the youth's fire was in my blood, I read of ancient freeman. From peace and wrong, who bravely stood 300 men a free man. And that my grave I yet might see, of brothers Brenton twain, and Ireland Holland's be a nation once again. Let's a nation once again. A nation once again. Ireland long our brothers be a nation once again. And from the time to win this war, that hope has shone afar light. For Cool's brightest summer glow outshine at solemn starlight. It seemed to watch above my head in morn and in vain. Its angel voice sang round my bed, a nation once again. A nation once again. A nation once again. And Ireland long a province be, a nation once again. So as I grew from boy to man, I bent me to that bidding. My spirit of each selfish plan and cruel passion to bring. For thus I hope someday to aid, oh can I hope so big, when here comes we shall be made a nation once again. A nation once again. A nation once again. And Ireland long a province be, a nation once again.
Here we go. So, we've done a wee bit with the foundation of the Fenian Brotherhood in America and what their expectations are. We talk about the Irish Republican Brotherhood, or as John O'Leary would have an eccentric would have it, the Irish Revolutionary Brotherhood, which is kind of a fact of the Irish monarchy. But the Irish Republican Brotherhood is founded on St. Patrick's Day 1850. Alright? And James Stephens himself, socialist in the French sense, not in the Marxist sense, the Bhloscaidh sense, tours the country and tries to spread this new organisation. He takes in like-minded groups such as the Phoenix Society and Skibbereen and Donovan Rossa. He appoints a revolutionary committee. Most of the revolutionary committee are also on the editorial board of the organisation's newspaper, the Irish People. Right. Stephens estimates that there are 80,000 Fenians in Ireland. This may be a slight overestimation. But it's clear that there are about 56 sworn-in members of the Irish Republican Party. And by a sworn-in member, we're talking about a secret organisation which is bitterly opposed by the Roman Catholic Church, which excommunicates anyone who takes a secret oath. Alright? Now, within the pages of this Irish People, the only real Catholic, the only person who actually believes in God, really, on the editorial board, George J. Kickham, wages war with the Catholic Church. And he wages war with the Catholic Church because the Catholic Church is the main adjunct of constitutional nationalism and Whiggism in Ireland. The politics of Daniel O'Connell. The politics of Daniel O'Connell is a politics based on British utilitarianism, on the idea that, this might sound familiar, the ends justify the means. You can compromise on fundamental principles in order to achieve what you want at the end. I leave that up to the audience's imagination. Okay? The bulwark and main phalanx of support for this type of constitutional nationalism is the Catholic Church. These are the people who collect the penny rent in Emancipation Days and the penny rent in Repeal. This is also an international organisation which is bitterly opposed to revolution. The leader of the Catholic Church in Ireland is Cardinal Paul Cullen, first Cardinal of Armagh and then Cardinal of Dublin, who gains his training in the Irish College in Rome and is bitterly opposed to nationalism. Nationalism in the sense of a democratic movement based on the 1848 wave of revolutions that take place in Ireland and across Europe. He calls Gavin Duffy, the young Ireland, the Irish Mazzini. Okay? but understand the role of the Irish Catholic Church as the bulwark of constitutional nationalism and the stopgap of British rule in Ireland. Because when the British were challenged, when there was a fundamental challenge to British rule in Ireland, the Catholic Church were given large amounts of money, as in the Maynooth, the building of Maynooth during the United Irishmen, or in the extension. Maynooth got bigger, let's put it like this, with every fundamental challenge to British rule. The British put a wing on it. Okay? So, Maynooth was built in the 1780s in order to get the Catholic Church on side against the United Irishmen, and it works. Maynooth was built again, it's extended during the repeal campaign because they don't want repeal. The Catholic Church operates as a bulwark against radical change in Ireland. Okay? But this doesn't stop the Fenians. In fact, and the best example of this to demonstrate the attraction of the Fenians, despite the fact that Paul Cullen issues a pastoral letter, despite the fact that Fenians are excommunicated, despite the fact that his colleague Bishop Moriarty of Kerry comes out with the famous statement that hell is not hot enough or eternity long enough for the likes of the Fenians. An event in 1861 proves that the Fenians had mass support amongst the lower orders in Ireland. And this is another very fine Republican tradition. Someone in America dies. Okay? So Terence Bally McManus from Temple in Fermanagh, a leading young Irelander, who's arrested during the insurrection, is sent to Australia, escapes from Van Diemen's Land, settles in San Francisco, dies. And the Fenians use the transportation of his body back to Ireland as a massive propaganda event in 1861. Cullen and the bishops refuse to give him the use of the Catholic Church and the Catholic burial, but a sympathetic priest, Father Rebel, does. And despite the sanction, let me shoot this quite quickly. Despite the sanction of the Roman Catholic Church, over 50,000 people attend his funeral. So this idea within revisionist historiography that somehow republicanism is inherently a form of Catholic nationalism, armed Catholic nationalists, is a complete subversion of the historical reality. These people stood up against clerical dictation and politics. And this is why Jenny Marx's daughter, is wearing a cross. She's an atheist, but she's wearing a cross in solidarity for Polish nationalists, and she's wearing a black ribbon behind it in solidarity for the Fenians and the Manchester martyrs. Because both Marx and Engels believed that there were two nations in Europe which had to achieve national independence before they achieved social independence, or socialism. That were the Catholics of Ireland and the Catholics of Poland. But not out of any religious manifestation, but because religion was an indicator of the colonialism and the oppression involved in Prussian, Russian and Austrian oppression in Poland and British oppression in Ireland. So what had Marx to say? This is an outline of a report on the Irish question of the Communist Education Association of German Workers in London. Probably could have thought about a catchier title. The 16th of December 1867, he says, what is distinctive of Fenianism? Actually, it originates from the Irish Americans. They are the initiators and the leaders, but in Ireland the movement took root and is still really rooted only in the mass of the people, the lower orders. Irish republicanism, the United Irishmen, the Fenians, is the radical voice of the disenfranchised and the oppressed in Irish history. Constitutional nationalism is the voice of the middle class, wealthy, fat and content, who want their economic and social status to be reflected in their political status. They have no military leverage in order to do this, so they use the language of nationalism and Catholicism to mobilise popular support in order to put pressure on the British establishment, not to overturn British rule in Ireland, but to park a chair up at the top table for them. This is what Catholic emancipation is. Okay? That is what characterises it. This is a lower class movement. In all earlier Irish movements, the people followed the aristocracy or middle class men, and always the Catholic churchmen. Catholic clergy decreed a ban on Fenianism, which it did not lift until it realised that its attitude would deprive it of all influence on the Irish masses. And let's look at this. This is Charles Kickham writing publicly in the Irish People, an exact same analysis is being produced by the Fenians themselves. So these revisions, Vincent Comerford doesn't include any of this in his book. Okay? Vincent Comerford, as I've said before, implies labels like class, like a child uses crayons. Okay? He has no fluidity of thought. He doesn't know what a class-based movement is, what the class forces behind the rise of Fenianism is. I'd like this to be on YouTube, by the way, so that I can hear He reviewed my book. So, favourably, but it's still a week. So we saw clearly that the people should be taught to distinguish between the priest as a minister of religion and the priest as a politician before they could be got to advance one step on the road to independence. The people for whom God created it must get this island into their own hands. If they do not, the Irish nation must disappear from the face of the earth. Liberty must be won by force or not at all. It is criminal in the eyes of certain ecclesiastics, and there's Paul Cullen in the background, to attempt to save our country by force. Therefore, we must either give up our country in despair or teach the people to disregard political ecclesiastical dictation. And this is essentially what happens. It doesn't manifest itself or turn out in the great revolutionary redistribution of land or in the nationalisation of land, which the great Fenian Michael Davitt envisaged, but it is essentially through the agency of the Fenians and a popular social revolution that this massive torrent of emigration is restricted through peasant proprietorship. A conservative outcome to what is essentially a radical social revolution. And this radical social revolution is conditioned by the Irish people's understanding that the economic system as it stood would lead to the destruction of the Irish people if they do not stand up against it. And under those conditions, not as some abstract idea that you could go out and shoot somebody if you want, under those conditions, physical violence is permissible. Because it is a choice between physical violence and the extermination and extinction of the Irish people. And on that light note, Joe Hill.
Okay. We're having a discussion earlier before. We just put ideas together first because it was really just put together minutes before we continue.
Oh, it was well planned.
But anyway, he was asking me did I know any songs that would be like anti-clerical or...
We're going to have to start writing anti-clerical rebel songs.
So the thing is, I had a think about it and thought, well, actually it's right up the street, so I actually think I write something now. But in the meantime, I thought, well, someone who was renowned for being an evangelical atheist was Joel Heimler. Joe Hill, he was known by the Americans because they couldn't pronounce his name right. But he came from Sweden, and he was an educator for the industrial workers of the world, trade union movement, and like many, James Connolly, he also agitated for the same movement. Sacco Manzetti, they were all executed, and he was no exception. So I'm going to sing a Joe Hill song.
Martin gave his funeral oration.
Sorry?
Jim Martin gave the speech at
Yeah. Thank you. A sweet song called The Preacher and the Slave. What he used to do, he used to get the Christian songs, and then he used to convert them into evangelical atheist songs, just to really piss them off. Government preachers come out every night. They try to tell us what's wrong and what's right. But when we ask them for something to eat, then the answer, the voice is so sweet. You'll leave by and by in a glorious land above the sky, way up high. We can pray, you can live on me. You'll get high in the sky when you die. That's a lie. And the Salvation Army, they pray. Then they sing, then they dance, and they pray. Until they get all your coin on their drum.
then they'll tell you when you're on the bum. You'll need by and by in that glorious land above the sky, where you're back, work and pray. You can't live on hay. You'll get by in the sky when you die. Working class of all countries unite, side by side, for freedom we must fight. When the earth and its wealth we'll gain, to the rafters we can sing this refrain. We will live by and by. Amen. I forgot the words. By and by. Above the sky. Chop some wood. I'm only human. It'll do you good. I'll tell you. In your sweet by and by.
We left the Nordic. I don't like Nordic, but I was going to have the Nordic. We left the Nordic with Terence Paddy McManus's funeral and the readying of Cardinal Paul Cullen's reaction. Cardinal Paul Cullen plans to establish the Irish National Association, which is a play on words and Holland's Catholic Association, under the leadership of a former young Islander called John Dillon, who, like leading academics, was very hard when he was young and then became increasingly conservative as he got older. And this Irish National Association stands opposed to Fenianism and is trying the corporate historian JLE calls the entire affair a camel and teacup. Because the Irish people do not want another regurgitation of this tame constitutional nationalism. The mass of the ordinary Irish people are with the Fenians. The Fenians have built up a widespread network of sales. John Devoy, that famous Fenian, suggests himself that he has 8,000 Fenians within the British Army. We might reduce the figure slightly. But inside the British garrison in Ireland, the Fenians have their own supporters. The American war is continuing and Stevens procrastinates. Okay? Stevens says we have to wait for the end of hostilities in America. We have to wait for the end of hostilities in America. And while he operates this policy of procrastination, the British do what the British do to all clandestine Republican organisations. And this is one of the things that Marx and Engels criticised about the conspiratorial nature of Fenianism, is that it leaves itself open to infiltration and to mistakes which tarnish the movement. Okay? The British employ cows. Okay? I don't need to tell anybody around here what it hurts. Alright?
Good morning, what a short day.
So, who's the Freddie Scotland Hitchy of the Fenian? He's a teacher. Yes, no, we're not all good. He's a teacher called Pierce Nagel. Pierce Nagel, former teacher, works in the Irish people. He's approached by the Royal Irish Constabulary, who get the Royal because they defeated the rather feeble attempts of the Young Irelanders in the William McCormick's cabbage patch in 1848. It's got nothing to do with American laws. It's actually a race. So, Nagel in 1865 essentially informs on the leadership of the Fenians, because the leadership, the board of the Fenians, and the editorial board of the Irish people, probably not been thought out, were the same thing. And the British raid the Irish people. Okay? They raid the Irish people and they decapitate the organisation, but it's still a cell-based organisation and it survives. There's potentiality here. They then arrest Stevens. Okay? Stevens escapes. You would think now he's escaped and the Brits are on their tail. He needs to strike while the iron's hot. January 1866, goes to America. He meets with John Devoy, who's also left with America. John Devoy tells him, Jimmy, we need to strike now. If we don't strike now, the movement's going to be destroyed. The British are going to suspend habeas corpus. That's a posh word for internment. And they're going to purge the Irish regiments. They're going to send the Irish regiments abroad. They're going to whip known Fenians, not in some sort of kinky way, but as a public demonstration of the folly of trying to subvert the British Empire. There are court-martials, 150 court-martials. There are hundreds of Fenians are arrested. But rather than striking before all this happens, what does Stevens do? He procrastinates again and calls the thing off. And they lose this vital opportunity. The Boy never forgives them for this. The Boy says, that was the, if you hadn't stuck in 1865, we had some chance. Even in January 1866, we would have still been able to present a formidable military challenge to British rule. But essentially what happened was the British struck first and fatally undermined the organisation. So when the Fenian Rising does happen, and the decision is essentially taken in New York in December 1866, when the Boy, Captain James Kelly, Americans call it Kelly for all this trouble. Whenever Captain James Kelly and the Boy essentially get rid of Stevens and say, right, there's going to be a rising. Okay? But it is clear that had military Fenianism have acted in 1865 or even early 1866, they would have presented a far more formidable challenge than the rising of 1867. Okay? How do we know this? Because Hugh Rose, the leader of the British garrison in Dublin, wrote that had a rising taken place in 1865 before military Fenianism had been properly dealt with, something
Is that a Christian word we're looking at? 20 quid
something very much. He basically said that had the Fenians acted, this is the leader of the British garrison in Dublin, had the Fenians acted in 1865, they would have inflicted far more damage to British rule in Ireland. But the opportunity was missed. Okay? Now, this is not to detract from the mass support that Fenianism gained. Fenianism had essentially become the ideology of the Irish lower orders. Not only in Ireland, but the diaspora in England as well. Michael Davitt, perhaps one of the most famous Fenians, is in a cell in Manchester. He loses his arm in an accident in a cotton mill as a young man. He gets 7 years jail for importing arms. The Fenians have networks across London and Northern England. And this fusion of democratic and socialist politics, radical politics in Britain, the influence of radical politics in France, the fusion of this with a tradition of national struggle in Ireland, and a tradition of agrarianism and secret societies, this is what gives Fenianism its radicalism and its socialist thing. As the proclamation says, the Fenians have no qualms with the English working class. This idiotic antipathy towards everything English, born everything English but it's cold. The English working class, the Fenians envisage as the allies of the democratisation of Ireland. They draw from the Chartist movement. The leader of the Chartist movement, Fearghal O'Connor, is an Irishman. His dad was in the United Irishmen. And this British radicalism mixed with Irish radicalism, and the fusion is apparent in Fenianism. What Marx says is that the social conditions in Ireland is what gives the Irish nationalist struggle, and he means the Irish nationalist struggle, the Irish Republican struggle, not the constitutional nationalist demand for the crumbs from the table. The Irish Republican struggle, its socialist character. He writes that Anglo's Fenianism is characterised by a socialistic tendency. So people who argue that there's no socialism within Irish republicanism, people who pretend to be Marxists and argue this, I think there's no better authority on Marxism than the bearded fella himself. He says that it has a socialistic tendency, and I'm not talking about the other bearded fella. I'm not talking about him at all. In a negative sense, directed against the appropriation of the soil, and by being a lower orders movement. This is a lower order socialistic movement produced by the convergence between a tradition of resistance to oppression, social conditions, and ideas from outside. Okay? That's the end of the talk about dialectics. Proclamation. How do the Fenians express this themselves? They say all men are born with equal rights and are associated to protect one another and share public burdens. This is civic virtue, this is republicanism. Justice demands that such associations should rest upon a basis which maintains equality instead of destroying it. We intend no war against the people of England, or wars against the aristocratic locusts, whether English or Irish, and most of them have landed in England and Ireland. Particularly that fine example of democracy, Winston Churchill, who has lands in both England and Ireland. I mean, not go into Winston Churchill and why he was voted the greatest Briton of all time, in fact, despite the fact that he was racist and responsible for the death of 3 million Fenians. But anyway, so we intend a war, a republic, they ask, which should secure to all the intrinsic value of their labour. And this is the hallmark of thumbprint of British radicalism. This is why John Patrick MacDonald, Fenian, is invited on to the First International. So we're not arguing that all Fenians were socialists. But what we are arguing is that form of social radicalism was inherent in Fenianism, not only in the conditions which produced it, but in how the Fenians saw themselves, in the Fenian worldview. And that this social radicalism was consistent within Irish republicanism, but that there was a tension. And the tension was between conservative elements within Irish republicanism and more left-leaning or socialistic elements. They haven't gone away. So the soil of Ireland, at present in the possession of an oligarchy, belongs to us, the Irish people, and to us it must be restored. Okay? And on that, we'll have a wee bit of socialist stuff. Got that one right?
No, the thing was, I couldn't see the red because your hands were nice off. Maybe it's the green flag. This flag is, or this song was written by Jim Connell, an Irish socialist, during the time of the Fenians. Should we do the original version or do the modern version? He really didn't like this modern version.
Yeah, the Christmas tree.
Yeah. What do you think?
The white of the 8th, huh?
Yeah. The original. Yeah, we'll do it first. I'll just have to do this acapella, alright? The people's flag is deepest red, and shrouded up our marketplace. And there their limbs too stiff and cold, their hearts blood dyed at every fold. And red the scarlet standard high, within its shade may live and die. Though cowards flinch and traitors sneer, will keep the red flag flying here. Look around, the Frenchman loves its blaze, the sturdy German chants its praise. In Moscow's vaults its in their song, Chicago swells its surging throng. And red the scarlet standard high, within its shade may live and die. Though cowards flinch and traitors sneer, will keep the red flag flying here. With our heads uncovered, swear us all to bear it onward till we fall. Come dungeons dark or gallows grim, the song will be our parting hymn. And red the scarlet standard high, within its shade we live and die. Though cowards flinch and traitors sneer, we'll keep the red flag flying here.
Kelly and the Boy decide that there's going to be a rising. The rising is going to happen simultaneously in England and Ireland. Kelly goes to England and is arrested. Okay. He also has appointed a military council, and one of the leading figures on the military council is a leading French revolutionary socialist, Gustave Clouseau, who will later be one of the military leaders of the Part Commune. Now, Clouseau argues that they should adopt guerrilla tactics. That because they have support throughout the countryside, but they don't have sufficient arms, that they should have a guerrilla campaign. But the new leader, a loser man by the name of Godfrey Massey, says that no, we're going to have an open pitch battle just like they used to have in America. Before all this happens, a faction, so if you put two Republicans in a room for 5 minutes, you have two groups at the end of it, a faction decide that they're going to unilaterally start the rise in England, and they invade Chester Castle. But there's a problem, and I'm sure you all know what the problem is. There's another stake in Chester. Okay, John Joseph Gordon, he tells the authorities what's going to happen. They're waiting for the Fenians to raid the castle for the guns, and all of them are lifted. Okay? This doesn't deter the Fenians, of course. Their indomitable spirit continues. Massey then goes over to Ireland to launch the Rising in Ireland, and the day before the Rising, he's arrested and turns informer. Yes. Think back to Potter O'Donnell, and I was never in the winning side of anything in my life. There's no help from America. They go out, there are some skirmishes in Cork, Bury, outside Holland, Dublin, but the police operate their own flying columns. First time the flying columns is used in Ireland actually by the police force, and the Rising is mopped up pretty quickly. Okay? Now, if you want to epitomise the ill fortune and misfortune of Irish Republican military struggle, you need only know that from the Rising 2 months later, a boat full of American officers and Civil War veterans and guns land in Ireland 2 months later. What is the name of that boat? Ireland's Hope. So this is what characterises the military operations of Fenianism. What happens is, what redeems the situation to a certain extent, is that Kelly is being transferred back from court to jail, and the Fenians in Manchester attempt a raid. They attempt a raid of the prison van. In opening the door of the carriage, they shoot through the lock and they kill a policeman inadvertently. They free Kelly, but the police draw the Irish district in Manchester and they arrest between 5 and 6 people. 3 of them are then sentenced and convicted, and they're hung in November 1867. They are Allen, Larkin and O'Brien, the Manchester martyrs. And this is what Marx and Engels have to say, not only about Fenianism as a manifestation of a radical type of republicanism, but about the Manchester martyrs. Marx said in November the 2nd, 1867, before they're actually hung, I used to think the separation of Ireland from England impossible. I now think it inevitable. And this is how Ireland influenced the thinking of the 2 major theoreticians of socialism in the 19th century. Before their experience of Ireland, before their experience of Fenianism, they felt that the colonies, colonial peoples, lacked the ability to liberate themselves. They changed their position as a result of their analysis of Ireland, and they changed their position also in India, which was quite negative before this. Okay? And this tradition of socialism, as a means for the liberation of national liberation movements, which manifests itself in the 1950s and 1960s and the 20th century, traces itself back in many respects to Marx and Engels' analysis of the liberation movement in England's first colony, Ireland. He said, and this is Engels, the London proletarians, these are the London working class. Now, the Daily Mail were too keen on the Fenians. Okay? They're still not too keen on the Fenians. But the London proletarians, the London working class, declare every day more openly for the Fenians, and hence, an unheard of and splendid thing here. For first, a violent, and secondly, an anti-English movement. Okay? Now, if you want to talk later on about Fearghal, we will, but we don't have time really. But this is Engels' letter to Marx on November the 24th, and this demonstrates really the impact of the Manchester martyrs. He says, so yesterday morning the Tories accomplished the final act of separation between England and Ireland. The only thing that the Fenians still lacked were martyrs. To my knowledge, the only time that anybody has been executed for a similar matter in a civilised country was the case of John Brown of Harper's Ferry, the great emancipationist before the American Civil War. And this is key. The Fenians could not have wished for a better precedent. The Southerners had at least the decency to treat John Brown as a rebel, whereas here everything is being done to transform a political attempt into a common crime. And the people of this area do not need any further explanation of British attempts to characterise the national liberation movement as a criminal conspiracy. Crime is crime is crime. It's not political, it is crime. And this obviously used to be the Irish national anthem before Ireland the Vein, and it's an anthem composed in memory of the 3 Manchester martyrs.
Upon the gallows 3, from the noble heart 3, by the vengeful current
begin in the bloom. But they met them face to face with the courage of their race, and they went with soul and doctored to their doom. God save Ireland, said the heroes. God save Ireland, said they all. Whether on the scaffold high or the battlefield we did, oh, no matter when or Ireland we fall. When they're up the rugged stair, rang their voices out and proud, then put England's faithful court around them cast. Beside the gallows tree, kissed their brothers lovingly, true to home and death and freedom to the last. God save Ireland, said the heroes. God save Ireland, said they all. Whether it's on the scaffold high or the battlefield we die, oh, no matter when, we're Ireland we fall. Never till the latest day shall their memory pass away. Oh, the gallant lives just given to our land. The cause must go amid the joy, the weal and woe, for we make our island nation free and grand. God save Ireland, said the heroes. God save Ireland, said they all. Whether on the scaffold high, on the battlefield we die, oh, no matter when, or Ireland will we fall.
Story's over, the narrative's over, the Fenians have been defeated. But to say that again, they didn't go away, you know. Okay, so what is Fenianism after this point? I'm not going to then give you a lecture on the history of Fenianism. I tried to do it in one slide. They told me I couldn't do this. That's right. Okay? The Fenians are integral to the subsequent Irish Land War. There is no Irish Land War without Fenianism. And there is no Irish Land War without opposition to the social and economic conditions which generated Fenianism. The Fenians, John the Boy and Michael Davitt, form an alliance with constitutional nationalism, with the most radical and nationalist element within constitutional nationalism personified in George Stuart Parnell. George Stuart Parnell is elected the MP for Meath. He makes a speech and he says, as a result of the Fenians, William Urt Gladstone is elected as Liberal Prime Minister. He says his mission is to pacify Ireland. And in 1869, he disestablishes the Church of Ireland. In 1870, he introduces the first Irish Land Act. It's what formed the Home Rule Party, and a radical contingency of Fenians enter the Home Rule Party. They enter Parliament. Joseph Bigger, a hunchback Protestant from Belfast and a Fenian, is the MP for Calvin. They practice obstructionism, which is very similar to most of my lectures, but not the lecture tonight. Which is that they stand and talk for hours in a monotone fashion about boring subjects in order to obstruct the business of the House. George Stuart Parnell is the biggest obstructionist of the lot, and he gains the attention of the Fenians by saying, why was the English Church in Ireland disestablished? Why were the tenants given some recompense? It was because a lock was shot out of a prison barn door. It was because of the violence of the Fenians. And the Fenians all go, oh, who's this boy? And this leads to the new departure in 1879, and this leads to the Land War. And without the involvement of the Fenians as the military agent of the social revolution that is the Land War, there will be no Land War. There will be no Land Act. And there will be no campaign for Home Rule. Now, I could talk for about an hour on how Parnell does a dirty job on the Fenians. Okay? But I won't. We talk rather about Fenianism not as an expression of militarism, not Republicans as nationalists with guns, but the ideology of the lower orders in Ireland who will employ physical force when the context is right and when they feel it is morally justified in order to democratise Ireland, to make it a more egalitarian and a freer society. This is not the same as the fetishisation of military struggle. That's Romish. And that is not what the Fenians practice. That is not the new departure. That is not the involvement of Fenianism within the Long War. Engels, writing a letter to Bernstein, who he didn't realise was going to turn into a reformist opportunist. But Engels writes a letter to Bernstein, one of the chief leaders of the German Social Democratic movement, in 1882. This is when the Long War is coming to an end. This is when Parnell is released from Kilmainham jail. Gladstone signs the Kilmainham Treaty with Parnell. Parnell outflanks the radicals. But this is a description of the role of Fenianism and the future role of the Fenians. That is why there's a man from the greatest place on God's earth on the left-hand side of the slide. It says, many Fenians have doubtless now returned and restored the old armed organisation. There wouldn't have been a Long War without it. They form an important element in the movement and force the Liberals to make more decisive action. Okay? There's nothing like a wee bit of dynamite to move Gladstone along. But apart from that, they cannot do anything but scourge on Bull. They cannot successfully achieve an armed insurrection. Though he grows noticeably weaker on the outskirts of his empire, which is John Bull, or Chambouy, this is England, he can still easily suppress any Irish rebellion so close to home. In the first place, in Ireland there are 14,000 men of the Constabulary Gendarme. So there's only 14,000 Peters, who are armed with rifles and bayonets and have undergone military training. By the way, there are only 13 years out of the entire passage of the Union, which lasts over 120 years, in which emergency legislation is not enforced. So the Special Powers Act wasn't just enforced in the North. The Special Powers Act, or a version of the Special Powers Act, was enforced in Ireland, and British rule in Ireland depended on emergency legislation and the subversion of the very rights of citizenship that freeborn Englishmen enjoyed, because there was no legitimacy to British rule in Ireland. British rule in Ireland relied on these guys. Besides, there are about 80,000 regulars, soldiers, who can easily be reinforced with an equal number of regulars and English militia. In addition, the Navy, Route Battalion and all that crap. And John Bull is known for his matchless brutality in suppressing rebellions, as this gentleman will find out. This is completely prescient. Without war, or the threat of war from without, an Irish rebellion has not the slightest chance. When is the next time that the Fenians believe it is morally justified to use armed insurrection in order to achieve their objectives? It's in 1916. And before that they don't. Because it's not morally justified, there's no chance of success. Therefore you don't go out and use armed struggle and political violence just for the sake of it because you think you're entitled to it. It has to be within a context which is linked to a radical, progressive, democratic ideology. Okay? And this is us. Therefore, we'll finish tonight's rant. But you won't do the green flag, or you can do both Fenian men, because it wasn't done at the start.
I don't like to sing that both Fenian men when Grania Holland's here, because she does a beautiful version of that.
Way.
Come on, Grania.
Oh,
yes!
Oh, yeah.
See, you made the first pound work.
Okay, she can't sing, explain it, she's got a sort of, I'm just going to say it's so mad, but it's alright, I'll leave you in peace. Alright, well we'll finish off with the green flag. Green flag was written by J.K. O'Reilly. J.K. O'Reilly was a Fenian also, and he's himself and his 6 sons, the youngest is 15, all volunteered and fought during the revolution of 1916 with the GPO, and he wrote this song. Beautiful song.
Oh, wrap the green flag around me, boys, to die. We're far more sweet with heaven's noble emblem, boys, to be my winding sheet. In life I've longed to see it wave and followed where it led. But now my eyes glowed and my hand would grasp its last bright shred. So wrap the green flag around me, boys, to die were far more sweet. With Aaron's noble emblem, boys, to be my winding sheet. Oh, had I hopes to meet you, boys, on many a well-thought field, when our bright green banner, boys, the treacherous foe would yield. But now, alas, I am denied my dearest earthly prayer. You'll follow and you'll meet the foe, but I shall not be there. And wrap the green flag around me, boys, to die were far more sweet. With Aaron's noble emblem, boys, to be my winding sheet. But though my body moulder, boys, my spirit will be free, and every comrade's honour, boys, will still be dear to me. And in the thick and bloody fight, let not your courage lag, for I'll be there and hovering near around the dear old flag.